Can we please make a very warm welcome for the beautiful Josie Thomson, who is going to give us some a talk in hope in, I love this title, I just want to get it right, Hope in Hopeless Situations, Rising Above Adversity. Can you please welcome to our stage Josie Thomson?
Good morning. I am so happy to be here to talk about a topic that is very near and dear to my heart, and that is about hope. In 1991, I was aged 24, and I had a lump in my throat, which I had ignored, which a lot of us often do, until it stopped me from being able to swallow. So I went to the doctor, he had a feel around, and he said, I think it's glandular fever, but just to be sure, let's do an ultrasound. I was 24, super fit, never drank, never smoked, didn't bother with a biopsy. He did the ultrasound and discovered there was a tumour in my thyroid gland. And he said, okay, let's take it out. You'll be fine. You'll be in hospital for 24 hours and then you'll be able to go home. I went into hospital, had the first surgery. I was meant to go home that night and the doctor came in near midnight, and at the time my then husband was sitting beside me. And you know when someone's been crying, their eyes are kind of swollen and red? This was my doctor, and he'd been my doctor since I was a little girl. He didn't know how to tell me what he was about to say. And he said, Josie, I don't know how to tell you this, but it is cancer, it is stage 3, and it is malignant. And those words landed, but there was a part of me kind of knew that that was going to be the outcome. And another part of me, it felt like it was out of body. I felt like it was surreal. I was hearing some words that I didn't have full comprehension about its significance. Because at the age of 24, in 1991, you rarely heard the word cancer. How times have changed, yeah? So I understood, and in those days, if you heard the word cancer, there was an automatic assumption that cancer meant death. We didn't have the advancements of treatments that we have today, yeah? So he said to me, Josie, what it means is because we've disturbed it, it's probably going to spread, which it did, to my sternum and my lungs. So we need to do a second surgery very swiftly. And I knew I didn't need time to think. And these words just spilled out of my mouth. And I said, if you don't do the second surgery by tomorrow morning, I will never let you touch me again. And he knew I meant that. I didn't want to think about it. He was able to organise the second surgery for the next day. We did that. But that evening, when my then husband was ready to leave the room, he stood at the doorway and he looked at me. And I just had this feeling that that was going to be the last time I saw him. I never saw him again. So for him, when you get into moments of extreme fear, you remember we're both 24 years old and probably not emotionally equipped to deal with the situation, which was quite big. He got scared and figured if I leave first, I won't have to lose her. I had a new battle. And what I realised that, and I spoke about this yesterday in my talk about sovereignty, is that the brain has an automatic aversion to threat. So we automatically know what we don't want. And I automatically knew that I didn't want to die. But there was this willfulness within me that rose that night that said, I want to live. And I heard it and I felt it in every cell of my body. And there was something in me that aligned completely with that direction of my focus. And when that happens, nothing interferes with your direction. Because what you do is you get willful, you get focused, and then every thought, every emotion, every action aligns in that direction of focus. Have you heard the words, where focus goes, energy flows? It's true, right? But generally what we're doing, because that subconscious and unconscious mind that is defaulted towards threat and looking out for threat is usually driving, we're not aware that we're constantly trying to go there and focusing on what we don't want. And while we're focusing on what we don't want, we're not focusing on where we're trying to go. So it's really important to realise that these thoughts of what you don't want are not wrong or bad. They're totally human. but they're not going to get you where you want to go. So when those thoughts come up, what you need to do is think, okay, thank you, brain, for reminding me for the 100th time today what I don't want. What is it that I do want? That's all you have to do. Don't get into battle with yourself or beat yourself up. It is normal. And the more you practice that, the better you're going to get at doing that. All right? So anyway, long story short, I experienced my first near-death experience. After the second surgery, I was in intensive care for almost a week. I'd lost a lot of blood. And that first experience, I was totally awake and aware. So my body was unconscious. An aspect of my awareness floated up to the ceiling, and I had full view of my body lying in the hospital bed, and I had full awareness that an aspect of me was here at the top of the ceiling, floating in this serenity, in total peace and bliss, seeing my body and then seeing the lines go flat on the screen. And then the two nurses racing in and reviving the body. But as I was floating here, I heard this really big, booming male voice say, "It's not your time yet." And with that, I was back in the body. I never revived, I didn't regain consciousness. The next day, I was there again, still unconscious. And guess what? I heard every conversation in that room. The only people allowed to visit me was my immediate family. I could tell you exactly where they were seated, what they were wearing, who said what to whom, because I was totally awake even though my body was totally unconscious. So I can assure you, when someone's in coma, the last thing that goes is the hearing. They hear everything. Okay? So then I had my second near-death experience, and what happened? Exactly the same thing. An aspect of my awareness rose out of my body. I floated up in the air, looking down, and again this big male voice said, "It's not your time yet." And it was one of those voices you don't muck around with, you know. Normally you try to tell me what to do and I'll do the opposite. And I just went, okay, and I was back in the body and I was able to regain consciousness. But then after that, remember 1991, 24 years old, I was not into woo-woo. I was religious, not spiritual. I was raised a Roman Catholic. And the God that I knew would never let something like this happen to me. So all of a sudden I had these big questions about life, about God, the nature of reality, and why these things happen. What is cancer? How did I get it? How do I fix this? So this is the days before the internet and Google. So I went and bought every book I could on cancer to try to understand what is it, how do you get it, how do you heal it. I rang Ian Gawler in Melbourne. I got involved with Elizabeth Hayes' work and got involved with Wayne Dyer's work. And all of a sudden, this whole other world opened up to me. But the battle I mostly had was this battle with the religion that I was raised in, because I couldn't understand how the God that I knew would allow something like this to happen to me. So I went and saw the priest. And I said to him, "I need to talk to you." And I told him what happened. And his priority was, "Right, we need to do an annulment of your wedding." I said, "Excuse me?" He said, "We need to do an annulment of your marriage so then you can be received and welcome into the house of the Lord." And I looked at him and I said, "Whose rule's that?" I said, "Because the God I knew or know wouldn't expect me to lie that marriage existed." And so that's when the cognitive distortions started coming in. And so when things happen that you cannot explain with your rational mind, you start asking different questions. But not only do you ask them, you become the seeker. Because now you are invited to answer those questions, not seek outside of yourself for the answers. And so all of a sudden, the seeker in me was awakened. And this is when I abandoned my religion and turned to spirituality. Do I believe in God? Absolutely, yes. Do I believe in something bigger than me? Absolutely yes. Do I believe that that is capable of miracles? Absolutely yes, because I've seen it, I've experienced it. And I'm going to talk about that this afternoon when I do the healing circle. If any of you need a healing, whether it's mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, make sure you get to that. Okay? So then I didn't know how to tell people that I had this out-of-body experience. How do you explain it when none of my family was spiritual, none of us had heard of an NDE, and I didn't have a Google to go search what it was. So I never spoke about it for a long time. Fast forward, I moved to Brisbane to follow the sun, right? Intuitively, when that will said I want to live, all of a sudden I knew what I needed to do. I needed to change the environment that was actually what made me sick. And part of that was leaving my birth family. Look, when you're related to half of Melbourne and you're Italian, right? And then you say you've got cancer, I was getting phone calls from relatives saying, "Oh, Josie, I'm so sorry. I just heard, how long have you got?" Now, that's not really uplifting or helpful, right? And I knew I needed to get away from that. That was their fear talking to me. And what I became really sensitive to was the tuning in and being able to experience the energy of other people. And if they were coming into my field with fear, I could feel it, and it wasn't good for me. I knew I had to move. And when I was in the middle of treatment, I was offered a job with BHP Interstate in Brisbane. I was as sick as a dog. The guy in Brisbane rang me up and said, "Why haven't you applied for this job?" I said, "I'm in the middle of cancer treatment." And these were his words. He said, "That's no bloody excuse. Get your ass up here for an interview." So guess what I did? I got my ass up there for an interview. I got the job. And I actually stood on the tarmac. I left Melbourne. It was freezing cold, wet and raining. I got to Brisbane. It was blue skies, sunshine. I lifted the sleeves on my suit and I felt well, right? Had the interview. He offered me the job on the spot. Then the battle began between the head and the heart. The head said, "What are you thinking? You need the support of your family. You need to stay in Melbourne." Heart said, "Go." So that night I went to bed, I prayed. I said, "God, I don't know what to do. Let me know by morning what to do." Guess what? I knew by morning what to do. I picked up that phone and I said yes. I got to Brisbane. I stopped all treatments. I had one chemotherapy treatment. I felt sick. I didn't like the taste of it. I stopped it. They told me, "You're not allowed to stop. You've already started." I said, "Watch me." I then had radiation treatment. That was pretty toxic. We realised the type that they gave me, intravenous, kills people. Somehow I survived. Would never do that again. Then did radioactive iodine. And then I said, "You know what? I'm going to do it my way." So I just changed my diet. I'm totally vegetarian. I don't drink alcohol. I sit in the sun for 10 minutes every day. And I meditate. And I surround myself with people that are just beautiful. And I'm happy and I'm well. And I made a full recovery. Fast forward, 2010. These are my children, Harrison and Kristen. This was 2010. So this time I had a new battle. So I was working as an executive coach and I'd done my master's studies in neuroscience. And I had no idea why I needed to study neuroscience, but I had this calling to study neuroscience. Christmas Eve, 2009, I go and see a neurologist because I was getting this tingling down the right side of my face. They did a brain scan and they found a tumour on my frontal lobe. I got the news Christmas Eve. The surgery was booked for the 28th of January, 2 days after Australia Day. I had to get through Christmas and New Year without telling my kids. I didn't want them to know, and I didn't want to tell my family because I didn't want to distress anyone. That was the toughest time, lying to them, suppressing the truth. Anyway, we got through Christmas and New Year, and I was really worried because this time I was facing a battle with cancer, but I had 2 dependents and I was a single mum. And the pressure was bigger. And spiritually, I didn't feel strong. I really didn't know which way it was going to go. And then a girlfriend of mine said, "You need to go and speak to a spiritual healer in Sydney. She does trance channeling." And I went, "What's that?" She said, "Just go." So I rang her up and I said, do you have an appointment in the next 4 weeks? And she started laughing. She said, I'm booked out for 2 years, love. And I said, I really need to see you. And she said, oh, hang on, I just had a cancellation this morning. It's on the 26th of January, Australia Day. Can you fly down? I said, yep. So I flew down to Sydney, 5-hour session with this woman. I have never seen a trans-channeler in my lifetime. I sat down opposite her and she explained what was going to happen. And I was very skeptical, right? And she did this thing with her head and then her body kind of moved. And then this Asian male voice came out of her mouth and he started telling me, in 2 days' time, you're going to be offered all of these options and these are the only things you are to entertain. And I'm like, yeah, I couldn't believe it. I was like, wow, I've never seen or heard anything like this before. How could she know? She did not know I was having surgery 2 days later. So anyway, that guy, by the way, was the doctor who invented Reiki. So I had studied level 2 Reiki. That was him coming through. Then she said, oh, hang on, there's someone else. She did this thing with her neck. Then literally her body grew and became really big. And this big booming male voice shot out of her and said, in 2 days' time, you will be given a choice, but you must decide. I recognised the voice immediately. Remember that voice that spoke to me in 91? It was that one. And I said, what does that mean? And he said, in 2 days' time, you'll be given a choice, whether you want to return to my choir because you belong here with my choir, or whether you want to start your work in earnest. And I went, okay. And by this stage, all of my nails were hooked into my chair, right? And then I asked, who are you? And the voice said, I am Archangel Gabriel. Every hair on my body stood up. I burst into tears. The feeling of love, the unconditional love in that moment was overwhelming. It was just all-encompassing. And I felt the truth of that voice. And that voice has remained with me ever since. He went on to say a few other things, and then she channeled another little entity. She came back in the room, she said, because I was quite distressed. And she said, are you okay? I said, yeah, I just can't believe this, you know. And she said, oh, hang on, there's someone else. So then she did this thing with her neck, and her body actually shrunk, and this little child's voice came out. It was a cherub. And this cherub said, I got something for you, you know. And she started trashing this woman's room, like pulling drawers out, pushing papers everywhere. And I'm thinking, I'm going to get in trouble here, you know. Anyway, she found this tiny stacked shell. You know how you get those stacked shells and they're chipped and they're a little bit powdery on the edge if they're chipped? She found one of those. She said, this is for you. See this? She said, that's your bones. Your bones are very sick and we're going to make them better. Now, what I didn't tell this woman at all, not only was I diagnosed with a brain tumour, I was also diagnosed with 3 lesions of bone cancer in my right hip, my ribs, and around my skull. And no one knew that. And this little angel said, when you go into the hospital, ask them to strap this shell to your hands because we're going to make it all better. And I'm thinking, they're going to not let me do this. So I took it with me to the hospital. I showed the anaesthetist and the neurosurgeon. They looked at it and they went, yeah, okay. They didn't even ask me questions. They strapped it to my hand and I go into surgery with this thing in my hand. And the other thing Archangel Gabriel said to me is when you go in to surgery, make sure your hands are up because we're going to be holding your hands through the surgery. Anyway, I had the surgery. This is a photo of me in ICU the next day. Pretty intense. The equipment in there was amazing. Tubes all over the place. When you are on morphine, you do some pretty crazy things. Now, if you don't like graphic, look away for 1 second. I'm going to show you what's underneath that bandage, okay? So when we took the bandage off, the scar extends from this side of my head all the way round to the back of my head. And after that surgery, I could not walk or talk properly at all. This was when I got home eventually, 2 weeks later. My mother drove me back home, and this sign was literally outside my front gate. Prepare to stop. And guess what? My body had been warning me and begging me to stop for a long time, to rest, just to be, and I ignored it. Guess what? This is what the body does. It gives you a little tap. You're listening. Oh, let's make it a bit stronger this time. And then I had to have a 4v2 to stop completely, to realise I needed to tune in. And guess what? That 6 months was some of the toughest months of my whole life, because I couldn't walk or talk, but I learned to meditate. I learned to connect in with that inner voice. I learned to actually touch and feel the power that we have within us. I got to apply everything that I had learnt in my neuroscience studies to retrain myself to walk and talk again. The doctor actually said to me, "I'm so sorry, Josie, you will probably never walk or talk again." And lucky I couldn't talk, because if I could say out loud what I wanted to say, it would not have been pleasant. But I said this yesterday, when someone tells me what I can't do, the Taurian Italian female comes out of me, and I showed them how I'm going to do it. So I got intentional, and the two powers that we all have to create our reality are intention and attention. And guess who's in charge of that? You are. So when you get intentional and you focus your attention, God help anyone that tries to stop you. That's where your will comes from. These days, it's thy will be done through me, right? So what happened during this time is I actually started to rehearse every single day what it was like to talk again, what it was like to walk again. And in studying neuroscience, I studied this particular group of cells called imaginal cells. When you imagine yourself doing something, the same neural network fires up in the brain as if you're doing that action or activity. And if you rehearse that over and over again, guess what? You hardwire that in. So I retrained my brain and my body to be able to do that again. That's called neuroplasticity. And you can do that up until the day you die. That's how powerful we are. I want to tell you about my last NDE. The last NDE happened the year before last. I was suffering a very significant neurological disorder called primary dysautonomia, which meant that I would literally pass out. My blood pressure would drop to 47/37 like that, and I'd have no control, and I wouldn't have much warning either. So it was very dangerous. Anyway, the doctors said, "Look, we've got a new treatment. It's called ketamine, and we do it in a supervised environment in the hospital. Would you be willing to try it?" And at this stage, I'd already tried all these new trial drugs and nothing worked. The reason for this condition was that because of the surgery, I had brain scar tissue growing, and it was actually pushing up against the neural pathways that was affecting the whole right side of my body. I could not escape the pain every day. It was so painful. Anyway, I said, what have I got to lose? So I went in, had the first round, it lasted a week, and it was a complete success. So it was great. I had 6 months pain-free. So when the pain came back and the doctor suggested, let's do it again, I said, okay, let's do it, because it worked the first time. However, what happened second time was that the pain medication doctor decided to start me off on a higher dose than what I stopped with last time. And everything in my body said, this doesn't feel right. This is too high. I'm sensitive to medication. I don't need that much. But hey, she's the expert. She's a doctor. She's got the white coat on, and she's telling me it's okay. See what happens? We start to doubt that inner compass that says something's not right about this. So in my moment of insecurity, I kind of went, okay, let's try it. So we tried it on the higher dose. Straight away, my body started reacting. By the second day, my liver was screaming. I was in so much pain. And it got to a point where my liver went into toxic shock. My whole body, again, went unconscious. And I lost, my body froze basically, and I was unconscious. And they wrapped me up in a silver foil blanket trying to get me back, and I flatlined again. But this time, what happened was the most incredible NDE. This time, what I witnessed, even though my body was unconscious, I saw this amazing golden grid rising up out of my solar plexus area. And then I saw this beautiful white torus field coming down into the room, collecting this golden grid. And I'm like, and I actually interfered. I was awake in this area. I said, wait, hang on, am I dying here? I said, well, I haven't said goodbye yet. So I was totally aware that my body was unconscious in the hospital room. I was totally awake in this in-between space, watching my soul grid coming out of my body and this light coming in to draw it out. I was able to leave that room, find my father in the garden, my mother in the kitchen, my brother in his car, my sister at her house, my 2 children on the Gold Coast, say goodbye, and then bring my awareness back into the room. So that thing about being here, there, and everywhere at the same time, I experienced that. And it was effortless. I travelled at the speed of thought, right? And all of a sudden I was back in this in-between space where I'm seeing the grid and the light, and I said, okay, I'm ready now. But then this other voice rose out, and this voice said, not so fast. It's not you that decides when to tap out, it's me. And I'm thinking, holy shit, who's this? Because it wasn't the male, it was this really strong female voice. And this voice then went on to say, you've used me, you've abused me, you've ignored me, you've exhausted me, you've burnt me out. It went on and on and on. And then she said, so I'm the one that'll decide, not you. And I realised in that moment, it was the voice of my body. Like, I didn't realise my body had a voice. And everything that this voice said was true. I never valued rest. I never valued being still. Who had time for that when you had a mortgage and 2 young kids to get through school, right? And everything this voice said was true. And all of a sudden I could feel physical tears coming down my eyes. And I was begging this vessel for mercy and forgiveness. And I felt this shame, because everything this voice said was true. And I said, please give me one more chance. I never ever realised what the words, the house of God, meant, right? Until I had that experience. And now I have a profound relationship with my body. I consult my body every day. And if my body says stop, I stop. My body doesn't want to eat for 2 days, I don't eat for 2 days. It knows. The power that created us also heals us. And I'll be doing more on that healing. Don't miss that session today. Okay? And I did it, and so can you. Tesla said, if you want to understand the universe, you have to think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And guess what? That's what we are. That's what we are. Every single living cell in our body is energy, frequency, and vibration. And when you align with the frequency of healing, it's possible. But that means getting past the gatekeeper, the ego, the part that thinks it's in control. And I'll show you how to do that in the healing circle. You have this thing called the energy field, and it's yours. And you're the one that determines what happens in your energy field. I didn't know any of this until what happened to me. And what I realised is that the conversations you have out loud, every single cell in your body is listening. But it's every single cell in your body is also listening to what you don't say out loud. Those things that you say to yourself, that inner conversation that you have with yourself, is it in harmony with your inner loving guide? Or is it busy beating you up for the past, right? Maybe that's where your healing begins. And hopefully you get a chance of doing that with me today. Okay. And this is what I talk about with hope. If you believe, whatever you believe is possible. I really want you to think about that, because it starts with your thinking, but then it actually sinks into the heart. And when you sink into the heart, it becomes vibration. And once you hit the vibration, it becomes frequency. And that will overwrite any thought. But we need to overcome that because we've given dominance to everything above the neck. And we need to flip that and give the dominance here. Because the energy and frequency and the language of the body is not logical. It doesn't speak in words. It speaks in energy. And when you can understand that language, you can understand yourself, your truth, your authenticity, and what you need so much more clearly, right? And I spoke yesterday about the two major energies that we have. We have the energy of expansion and we have the energy of contraction. When something doesn't feel right, guess why? Because it's not right. Don't argue with it. It may not make no logical sense. Your body knows. The only part of us that is 100% present every single second of every single day, guess what? It's not the brain, because the brain's here, there, and everywhere. It's the body. The body knows. When you can tune into that, you have all the answers you need. And what I was talking about, the benefit of that, when you do that, is you become so much more self-aware. You become so much more of a conscious creator of your reality. And you then become your inner transformer. Okay? So one of the things I'm giving everyone away this weekend is a guide I put together called the Quantum Breakthrough Guide. This will help you align and transform your energy and your vibration. So if you put your phone camera on the QR code, you'll get a little yellow thing that comes up. Just click on that little yellow thing and put your email address in there and you'll get sent that guide straight away for free. The other thing that I'll do immediately after this talk is go to the speaker table. I've got some books there as well, which I'll be happy to sign for you if you'd like that as well. If you miss this QR code, it's also on the posters at the speaker table on the walls. Okay. Is it okay if I move? Okay. So I'm just going to end with one more slide and take some questions. The thing I want you to realise is this, that pain in life is inevitable. That's how we get to learn and grow. Suffering is optional. We do that to ourselves. Growth is intentional. You've got to choose that. So remember, it's not what happens to you that defines you. It's how you respond that counts. Shine on. So we have 6 minutes. If anybody has any questions, yep.
When you said goodbye to all your family, afterwards, they come back to you and say that they had sent something or...
So my mum is actually very spiritual, but she doesn't admit it. Like I often find her talking to herself, and just at Christmas time I said to her, "Who are you talking to?" And she goes, "Oh, stop it." I said, "No, tell me, you know me, I'm the weird one." And she said, "Oh, I'm talking to my mum," and her mum died decades ago. And I said, "That's great. How often do you talk to her?" And she was shocked that I was interested and totally okay with that. And she actually felt it. She said because I didn't tell my, it happened so quickly. None of my family knew that I died that night. And then a couple of days later, I actually told them. And Mum said, "The weirdest thing happened the other night. I was in the kitchen cooking and I just had this weird feeling about you." And I told her that was me saying goodbye. She felt it.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yep.
Hello, my name's James. Thanks for sharing today. I really enjoyed it. I just want to ask a little bit more gaps between, like, I know you had your cancer experience. and then there was a bit of a gap, and then you had the brain tumor.
Yeah.
In these gaps in between, did you kind of like abandon your spiritual relationship a little bit? Like, I want to understand, did you fall into like fast-paced Westerner mode? Like, where were you at? Yeah, could you speak a little bit more about that for me? Thank you.
So when that happened the first time, and then I went and bought all those books, that was my movement into spirituality. And that was pretty strong. Then quite a few years later, I met my second husband and I had my 2 children. My second husband wasn't spiritual at all, and I was busy with the children, so I kind of disconnected from some of that. And it really was when there was distortion happening within that relationship where, I was raised to keep family together. And then all of a sudden, when the dynamics of that relationship starts to compromise your sense of self-respect, you've got to start listening to this inner compass, right? And it got to the point where my sense of self-respect was hanging on a thread. And there was this one event that occurred in front of the children, and I looked at my then husband and I just did this. And I realised that's a really powerful movement. I didn't know at the time. I just went like this and I said, we're done. I'm leaving. And that's how I delivered it. It was really grounded, it was really calm, and it was all-knowing. And he looked at me and he said, don't just think about it, do it. I packed one bag and the 2 kids and I was gone. That's when I was back, right? So I think there was a period of time where I compromised because I had this other priority of building a family and putting everyone else in front of me. And then I got myself back. But again, I was tested, where I could hear that inner compass going, get out of here, something's wrong. But then I had the mental framework saying, keep family together, but at what cost? And then this one won, right? Now this voice now is the one that guides me and that I stay aligned with. Because how many more times do I need to get sick to get it? I don't need to do sick anymore, right? There's another story which I'll share in my healing circle that completely transformed my life just last year. And now this world of healing has opened up. And it's pretty profound. So I'll share that after this, actually.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I actually have one up here.
Hello.
Hi. When you said your first husband just walked out, did you ever hear from him again? Did he ever apologise for what he did?
No, I actually made the mistake of contacting him about 2 years later after I'd moved to Brisbane and I had the all clear. I thought, surely he'd want to know, So I managed to track him down because we lost contact. I rang him up, they put me through, and he said, what do you want? And I'm thinking, straight away, I shouldn't have called. I said, listen, I thought you might like to know that I'm in full remission now. And he said, cool story, and he hung up. And then I just went, you know what, why did I call him? Was it for me or for him? It actually was for me. I shouldn't have done it. He didn't care, Bless him. Yeah. Anyone else?
Check.
I think that's it. Okay, we're done.
And just before, I think you should have called him because it was for you. So there's nothing that you shouldn't have done. Your story is so relatable. And I just want to end with saying that phone call was not for him. It was for you. So don't for a second say you shouldn't have called him because you felt peaceful. That shows the capacity of your heart, and his reaction shows you his ego and the fact that he wasn't in his heart. Can you please honour this woman's story with your love? Thank you.